32 years. That's how long it took me to fill that garage. Every wrench, every socket, every machine had a story. My story. A place where noise was therapy and oil stains were memories. And they took it from me in one afternoon. I came home from my morning walk to find a dumpster in my driveway. My tools, my life, tossed in like trash. The smell of rusted metal and splintered would hit me before I even reached the garage. Inside, the concrete floor was bare. My workbench was gone. The pegboard where my father's old hammer had hung for decades, stripped clean. In its place, a sleek desk, cheap laminate flooring, a couple of plastic chairs. My daughter stood there smiling like she'd done me a favor. My son-in-law, wearing that smug half-grin he saves for moments when he thinks he's clever, slapped the desk like it was a prize he'd just won. Do you like it? We decided to convert the space into an office for Derek's business. It's going to be great for him. My wife stood beside them, arms crossed, not looking at me. We've been talking about upgrading the garage for a while, she said. It was just collecting dust. Collecting dust? That garage had been my sanctuary since before they moved into this house. Since before Derek even joined the family. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. I asked the only question that mattered. Where are my tools? My son-in-law shrugged. Most of it was junk, so we tossed it. Some of the heavier stuff's in the dumpster. Don't worry, we kept the little boxes you had stacked in the corner. They're in storage. The little boxes were my keepsakes, labeled organized, some untouched for 20 years. They weren't in storage. They were gone. You had no right, I said. He laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, you're overreacting. This will help me grow my business. Family supports family, right? I looked at my wife. She didn't speak. She didn't defend me. Just shifted her eyes to the floor. Something inside me went still. No shouting. No threats. Just a cold, precise silence. They thought they'd taken my garage. They thought it was over. But they'd just given me a reason to make sure it would never be over for them. Because in the corner, where the old tool chest used to sit, I noticed something new. A stack of unmarked cardboard boxes, sealed with heavy tape. And that was the moment I stopped being angry and started taking notes. I didn't touch the boxes. Didn't even lean in for a closer look. That's the kind of mistake amateurs make, the kind that lets someone rewrite the story before you've even started writing it yourself. Instead, I memorized the scene, the brand of tape, the way one of the corners was crushed inward, the faint chemical smell leaking from the seams. Don't mess with those, Derek called from behind me. There, inventory. Inventory. Not supplies. Not documents. Inventory. I gave him a slow nod, like I'd just agreed to keep his little secret. He grinned, thinking we'd reached some sort of understanding. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while their words replayed in my head. Inventory. The parade of blacked-out SUVs I had seen outside last week. The sudden need for a private office in my garage. It was all to me too fast. By morning, my anger had calcified into something sharper. A plan doesn't start with action. It starts with information. At noon, when the house was empty, I went to the shed and pulled out the small metal case I hadn't opened in years. Inside, the last remnants of my career in facilities security. A pinhole camera kit, motion sensors, a Wi-Fi relay. Outdated, maybe, but functional. In under an hour, a lens the size of a shirt button was fixed inside an air vent facing the garage floor. The feed ran straight to an encrypted drive in my study. No one would know it was there. That night, I sat in the dark and watched the footage. At 9:14, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled into the driveway. 2 men got out, each carrying a heavy duffel. They didn't knock. They didn't greet anyone. They walked straight into my garage, set the bags on that new desk, and left 5 minutes later without a word. At 9:32, Derek arrived. He locked the garage door behind him and opened the boxes. I couldn't see exactly what was inside, but I saw the way he handled it. Careful, respectful, like it was worth more than his own hands. I stayed up until dawn, watching every second on a loop. By sunrise, I had 14 still images and a 3-minute clip of Derek's business in my garage. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to finish him. Not yet. Because this wasn't going to be about calling the cops and hoping for the best. This was going to be about building a case so airtight that when it dropped, there'd be nothing left for him to wiggle out of. They thought the garage was theirs now. I was about to turn it into the last place on earth they'd want to be. The first rule of dismantling someone's life is simple. Never move faster than their arrogance. People who think they're untouchable will keep walking toward the cliff as long as you don't shout about it. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part they expected, the quiet, bitter old man sulking in his study. I let them believe they'd broken me. In reality, I was spending hours every day cataloging their every move. The camera gave me patterns. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, deliveries between 8 and 10 p.m. Always different vehicles, always tinted windows. Saturdays were for pickups. And Derek was there for every single one. But I needed more than schedules. I needed proof of what was inside those boxes. A neighbor gave me the opening. "Your garage looks different these days," he said over the fence one afternoon. "Lot of traffic lately." I shrugged. Derek's running his business from there. You know how young guys are. Always hustling. He laughed and shook his head. "Hope it's legit. My cousin's a state trooper, says that kind of late-night traffic usually isn't." That sentence lodged in my mind. My neighbor's cousin. Law enforcement. A potential thread to pull later. For now, I turned to public records. Derek's business was listed under a generic LLC with no clear industry code. The address? My garage. The filings were sloppy late annual reports, mismatched phone numbers, no tax registration under the state database. Sloppy was good. Sloppy was leverage. I went further. Business registry, property records, even online classifieds. Within hours, I found 3 ads selling rare goods, cash only, no returns, posted from an account linked to Derek's phone number. On day 12, the camera feed handed me gold. Derek opened one of the duffels. Inside were shrink-wrapped bricks, unmarked but unmistakable in shape and packaging. He stacked them like he was building a wall, then covered them with a cheap blanket before a visitor arrived. I took high-resolution stills. Cropped. Enhanced. Archived. By the end of the second week, I had dates and times of all deliveries and pickups, video of suspicious packaging handled by Derek, registry proof linking the business address to my garage, classified ads hinting at illegal sales. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was ammunition. And I wasn't going to waste a single bullet until I had the perfect target. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. First strikes aren't about knocking someone down. They're about making them look over their shoulder, just enough to disrupt their balance. Monday night, I printed 3 still shots from my camera footage. Derek lifting one of the shrink-wrapped bricks, a duffel bag open on the desk, and the black sedan parked in my driveway. Each photo went into an unmarked envelope with a single note typed on plain paper. "Nice office. You should keep it cleaner. A neighbor, no return address. No fingerprints." I dropped it into his mailbox just after 2 a.m., when the street was quiet enough to hear my own footsteps. The next morning, I watched from the kitchen window as Derek opened the envelope. His casual grin faded in slow motion. He checked the street, glanced at the garage, then walked inside without a word to anyone. 10 minutes later, the blinds were drawn across the garage windows. That was the first tremor. The second came 2 days later when I made a call to the county zoning office. Purely hypothetical, I explained, but could someone legally operate a warehouse-style business from a residential garage without proper permits? The woman on the line laughed, a dry, bureaucratic laugh. Not unless they want a fine big enough to choke on. That afternoon, I filed an anonymous complaint. Not about drugs, not about crime, just suspicious business activity at my address. I knew what would happen. An inspector would show up unannounced, clipboard in hand, poking around just enough to make Derek nervous. Friday morning, the inspector arrived. I didn't watch from the window this time. I sat on my porch with my coffee, looking like a man too bored to care. The inspector spent 15 minutes in the garage. Derek smiled the whole time, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. When the inspector left, Derek came outside and stood in the driveway staring at nothing. That's when I knew the first strike had landed. I'd shown him two things in 1 week: that someone was watching, and that someone knew how to reach him without ever stepping inside that garage. He didn't know it yet, but I'd just started the clock. The first strike had done its job. Derek was more cautious now, blinds drawn earlier, fewer vehicles pulling up to the garage. But that caution came with tension, and tension always leads to mistakes. I leaned into it. 2 days after the zoning inspection, I made my second call, this time to a journalist I'd known for 20 years. Back when I was still working, she'd been a hungry rookie covering city corruption. Now she was an investigative bulldog for the local paper. I didn't tell her everything. Just that I'd noticed unusual traffic at my address since a relative converted my garage into an office, and I was concerned it might be part of a wider problem in the neighborhood. Wider problem? She asked, that interest already sparking in her voice. Yeah, I said, letting a pause hang long enough to make her lean in. Late-night drop-offs, unmarked packaging, no visible permits. I've seen 3 different high-end sedans in 1 week. Might be nothing, but it might be something. She promised to look into it, which meant, at the very least, she'd start sniffing around, and people in Derek's line of work hate being sniffed at. While she dug her hooks in, I set my own trap. Through my neighbor's cousin, the state trooper, I learned about a state-run database tracking property addresses tied to suspected contraband storage. Access to that database was restricted, but his cousin didn't need to break the rules. All he had to do was confirm whether my address was on a watch list. It wasn't, yet. Which told me something important. Derek's operation was small enough to fly under the radar. That also meant I could push it directly into the spotlight without tripping over an ongoing investigation. Next, I went after the supply chain. Those late-night cars didn't all have local plates. 2 were from out of state. I had stills from my camera to prove it. I ran those plates through an online lookup service. One came back to a rental agency in Nevada. The other was registered to a shell company in Oregon. Both smelled like fronts. I packaged those images with timestamps and dropped them anonymously into the county sheriff's tip line. I didn't expect them to kick down the door that day. I just wanted the file open. Once there's a file, there's a trail. By week 3, the pressure was showing. Deliveries were rushed now, sometimes no more than 30 seconds from trunk pop to garage door close. Derek started parking his truck sideways in the driveway during office hours, like it could hide the comings and goings. It didn't. And then he made his first real mistake. The camera caught him at 11:42 p.m., unloading a duffel bag by himself, no lookout, no backup. He dropped it, unzipped it, and pulled out what looked like a ledger book. He flipped through it for a good 20 seconds before shoving it back and locking the bag. That image, Derek alone with what could easily be interpreted as financial records, went into my archive. But I wasn't finished escalating. The journalist called me back. "You were right," she said. "Your son-in-law's business isn't licensed for commercial operations at that address. And some of his associates? They've got priors." Perfect. We agreed she wouldn't publish anything yet. Instead, she'd start making casual inquiries, calls to Derek, to my wife, even to neighbors. I knew exactly how those calls would land, like grenades with the pins halfway pulled. By the end of the week, the first ripples hit the shore. My wife cornered me in the kitchen, voice sharp and accusing. "Did you tell anyone about Derek's business?" I didn't even look up for my coffee. "Plenty of people." "Why?" Her eyes narrowed. "We've been getting strange calls. Derek thinks someone's trying to ruin his reputation." I sipped my coffee, slow and deliberate. Maybe his reputation's doing that on its own. That night, I checked the camera feed. For the first time since this started, there were no visitors. Just Derek, sitting alone at his new desk, staring at the closed garage door like it might start talking back to him. The pressure was working, and I hadn't even shown my real hand yet. Pressure changes people. Some get sharper under it. Others start to crack. Derek was cracking. The first sign came on a Thursday afternoon. I was trimming the hedges when he stumbled out of the garage mid-call, pacing the driveway, voice low but furious. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "No, not here anymore. Too risky." I said, "It's covered. I'm handling it." He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and just assumed I was too far away to matter. Either way, the pacing told me something important. Whatever network he was part of didn't like changes in routine. And I'd already forced him to change it. The second sign came 2 nights later on my camera feed. He'd started doing spot checks on the boxes, opening them, rearranging items, resealing them. But it wasn't efficient. It was jittery, stop-start, like he was double-checking for something that might not even be there. That's the behavior of someone who's lost trust in his partners, in his environment, maybe even in himself. That was my cue to lean harder. I printed a second batch of photos, this time not just Derek, but close-ups of the cars, the duffels, even the crushed corner of one suspicious box. I mailed these not to him, but to my wife. No note this time, just images in a plain manila envelope, delivered during the day so she'd be the one to pick it up. She didn't confront me, but that night, their voices carried down the hallway. Derek swore it was nothing, just someone trying to stir up trouble. She pressed harder, asking why someone would have photos like that. He deflected. The argument fizzled into silence, but it was the kind of silence that lasts all night and into the next morning. That was the wedge I needed. Distrust in the home is like a slow leak in a tire. Eventually, they're stranded. Meanwhile, my journalist contact kept working her angle. She called me one morning, laughing. "Your son-in-law doesn't answer questions well." He hung up on me twice, and then his assistant emailed saying they don't comment on internal operations. Internal operations. Out of a garage. This is getting better by the day. I told her to sit tight. There'd be a much bigger story soon. The third crack appeared on a Monday. My neighbor, the one with the trooper cousin, stopped me on my walk. "Weird thing, I saw your son-in-law moving boxes into the back of a pickup around midnight. Not his truck. Different plates. Different plates meant different hands. Different hands meant growing risk. People in Derek's position don't change storage without reason. They change it because they're spooked, or someone higher up is forcing the shift. Either way, it meant instability. And instability is an open invitation. By now, my archive was massive. Over 40 stills showing suspicious deliveries and handling of sealed packages. 2 clips of out-of-state vehicles making drop-offs. Registry proof of the unlicensed business. Evidence of potential interstate connections. Documented behavioral changes under pressure, the kind of material police can't ignore. The kind of material a journalist could turn into a headline big enough to make the evening news. I decided it was time to add one more layer. Something subtle but irreversible. That Friday, I left a voice message with a detective I'd once consulted for back in my security days. I didn't give details over the phone, just asked if he'd be interested in a situation involving unregistered business activity, possible interstate trafficking, and solid photographic evidence. His callback came within the hour. We arranged to meet the following week. I slept well that night for the first time in months. Not because the job was done, it wasn't even close, but because I could feel the balance shifting. Derek wasn't running his operation anymore. The operation was running him. And soon, neither of them would be running at all. The man who'd walked into my garage thinking it was his kingdom had just stepped into a trap he couldn't see, but I could feel it tightening with every single move he made. The detective didn't waste time. We met at a quiet diner off the highway, the kind of place where conversations are drowned out by the hiss of the griddle and the clatter of plates. I brought a plain leather folder, nothing flashy, just enough to look like business. He flipped through the stills without a word. When he hit the frame of Derek holding the shrink-wrapped brick, his eyes narrowed. "Packaging's familiar," he said. "Not enough for a warrant on its own, but paired with these vehicle shots? Yeah, this is worth a closer look." I didn't push. Just slid over a second set, the business registry printouts, the unlicensed operation notice from zoning, the classified ads. "Your guy's not careful," the detective muttered. "That's how we get them." We agreed on one thing immediately. This wouldn't be a blitz. It would be methodical. He'd open an intelligence file. Surveillance would start within days. My footage would be backed up into their system. And in the meantime, I'd keep my camera rolling, because the more recent the evidence, the harder it is to wriggle out from under it. Back at home, I started noticing the changes. 2 black SUVs parked across the street at different times of day, always with tinted windows. A plain sedan that seemed to pass by the house at the exact same hours. None of it was mine, all law enforcement shadows. Inside the house, things were even better. My wife was keeping her distance from Derek. I hear her voice, quiet but clipped, while his got louder, faster, defensive. Arguments were shorter now, ending in slammed doors. Then came the call from my journalist friend. He knows someone's after him. I can hear it in his voice, jumpy, choosing words too carefully. But here's the best part. He's starting to talk bad about you to neighbors. I smiled. Good. That means he's running out of other explanations. By the end of the week, the detective called again. We've confirmed some of your delivery vehicles are tied to known distributors. Not enough to make arrests yet, but the net's tightening. You keep your feed running. We'll be ready when he slips. He didn't have to wait long. On a rainy Tuesday night, Derek got sloppy. The camera caught him leaving the garage door half open while transferring duffels to another car. A clear side view of the contents, stacks of sealed packages, one split open just enough to show powder. I froze the frame, zoomed, enhanced until the texture was undeniable. I sent the clip to the detective within minutes. His reply was short. This will do it. Now it wasn't a question of if. It was when. And when it came, I wanted Derek and the rest of them to feel it before the door even hit the wall. The garage was their fortress. Soon, it was going to be the evidence room. Desperation doesn't announce itself. It starts small, a tone in the voice, a glance that lingers too long, an edge in the questions they ask. With Derek, it began the morning after the rainy night footage. I was on the porch drinking coffee when he stepped outside, pretending to check the mail. His eyes scanned the street like he was expecting to see something or someone. He spotted me, hesitated, then forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Quiet day, huh?" he said. I nodded. For now. He lingered. "Hey, you ever notice any strange cars around lately?" I shrugged, keeping my expression unreadable. "Can't say I have." "Why?" He shook his head quickly. "No reason. Just, neighborhood watch and all that." Then he walked away before I could ask more. That was the first crack in his confidence. He didn't know what I knew. Worse for him, he didn't know how much I knew. 2 days later, my wife cornered me in the kitchen. Her tone was different this time, not accusatory, but almost pleading. "Derek's worried someone's targeting him," she said. "You've been acting strange, too. Is there something going on?" I sipped my coffee. "Lots of things are going on. You'll find out soon enough." She didn't like that answer. But she didn't press. That weekend, the real desperation kicked in. I caught it all on camera, Derek meeting a man in the driveway in broad daylight. No blinds drawn, no attempt at subtlety. They spoke in low, urgent tones, and I could read enough from Derek's posture to know it wasn't friendly. The man kept jabbing a finger into Derek's chest. Derek's hands were up, palms out. When the man left, Derek stood in the driveway for a full minute, rubbing the back of his neck like it physically hurt. That same night, my phone lit up. My wife's name. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. "We need to talk. Derek wants to explain everything. Please, just listen to him." I didn't call back. Monday morning, the call came from the detective. "We're ready to move. But I thought you'd want to know your son-in-law's been making some panicked calls to people we've had our eyes on for a while. The kind of calls that tell us he knows his time's almost up." Perfect. Later that afternoon, my wife and Derek showed up at my study door. They didn't knock. She sat down. He stayed standing, like sitting would make him weaker. "We're in trouble," he said flatly. I let the silence stretch. He glanced at her, then back at me. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot with the garage thing. And maybe I should have asked you before. You should have, I cut in. But you didn't. And now you've got bigger problems than redecorating my property." His jaw tightened. "We just need some help. Financial help. Temporary." I leaned back in my chair. "Why? So you can keep running whatever's in those boxes?" That stopped him cold. His eyes flickered, not to her, but to the floor. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. My wife's voice broke in. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that," I said. "And you're both about to find out what happens when you try to build your life inside someone else's walls." They left without another word. That night, I called the detective back. Whenever you're ready, I told him. I want front row seats. Because desperation was about to turn into collapse. And collapse was where I planned to stand, watching when the whole thing came down. The detective didn't give me an exact date. Just a short text, "It's happening this week." I didn't ask for more. I wanted it to blindside them the way they'd blindsided me, sudden, total, and inescapable. The night before it happened, the house was tense. My wife barely spoke. Derek paced the kitchen like a caged animal, phone in hand, making whispered calls that ended with abrupt hang-ups. At one point, he opened the fridge, stared into it for a full 30 seconds, then shut it without taking anything. He wasn't hungry. He was waiting. I was waiting, too, but for something entirely different. When morning came, it arrived with the sound I'd been imagining for weeks. Heavy fists on the front door. Not knocking. Pounding. A voice followed, loud and unmistakable. Sheriff's Department. Search warrant. From my spot at the kitchen table, I saw Derek freeze midstep. My wife's coffee mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the tile. I didn't move. I just sipped mine, slow and calm. The door swung open and the flood came in uniforms, tactical vests, gloves snapping on. The lead officer handed Derek a folded sheet of paper. "Step outside, sir." "What's going on?" my wife asked, her voice high, almost panicked. The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, we have a warrant to search the premises, specifically the garage." I stood then, just to get a better view, as they funneled toward the back. The garage door opened, and within seconds, the air was filled with sharp, commanding words, clear. "Bag this. Document that." Derek tried to follow, but 2 deputies blocked him. "You'll stay right here," one said. From the kitchen, I could hear the sound of boxes being cut open, tape ripping, cameras clicking. Every sound was a nail in his coffin. One deputy came back holding a shrink-wrapped brick, the same kind I'd seen on my camera. "Found this under the desk," he said to the lead officer. "Tag it. Keep going." Derek's face drained of color. He turned to me then, not with anger, but with something else. Recognition. He knew. He finally knew. I held his gaze and let the moment stretch. "You took my place of peace," I said, my voice steady. "I took away yours." They cuffed him right there in the kitchen. My wife started shouting at them, at me, at no one in particular. But her words were background noise now, because the real sound was Derek being walked out the front door in front of every neighbor on the block. And I wasn't done yet, because the journalist had been waiting 2 houses down, camera ready. As Derek was loaded into the back of the cruiser, she started snapping photos. Tomorrow, his face would be on the front page. Not smiling, not smug, just caught. The police stayed for hours. They cataloged every box, every duffel, every scrap of paper. I stood in the doorway, a silent witness, as evidence bags piled higher than the workbench that used to be mine. Every item they carried out felt like a brick in the wall I'd been building for months, a wall between Derek and the life he thought he had. My wife sat at the dining table, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't look at me, not once. When the deputies started carrying out the last of the evidence, she finally spoke. "They'll think I'm part of this." I set my coffee down. If you didn't know what was happening in your own house, that's one problem. If you did, that's another. Either way, you made your choice when you gave him my garage. Her eyes flashed, but whatever argument she was about to make died before it reached her lips. By noon, the street looked like a crime drama set, marked cars, unmarked cars, curious neighbors pretending to check their mail. The journalist moved among them like a shark in shallow water, recording quotes, snapping photos, whispering to anyone who'd talk. She caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. We both knew the story would be live by evening. And it was. The headline on the local paper's site read, "Local man arrested in major illegal storage operation, tied to residential garage." The photo was perfect, Derek in handcuffs, being led down my front steps, jaw clenched, eyes fixed somewhere far away. The article was even better. It named him. It named his company. It laid out the charges in plain, brutal language. Possession with intent to distribute, unlawful storage of controlled substances, operating a business without a license. It even mentioned my address, and how the property owner had cooperated fully with investigators. I didn't write that part, but I couldn't have scripted it better. By the 6 o'clock news, the footage had gone regional. By the next morning, it was national. The fallout was immediate. Derek's so-called associates vanished, no visits, no calls. His business phone went straight to a recorded message about temporary suspension of operations. My wife stopped answering her own phone. She knew what the whispers would be now. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a copy of Derek's bail conditions. He wasn't allowed within 200 yards of my property. I poured myself a drink and sat in the quiet. The garage door was still open from the search, the late afternoon sun cutting across the bare floor. No desk, no boxes, no smell of chemicals, just empty space. Mine again. It didn't feel the same as before. It felt better. I walked in, listening to my own footsteps echo off the walls. I could rebuild here if I wanted. Reclaim the workbench. Rehang my father's hammer. But maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd leave it just like this, a reminder of what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. That night, I stepped outside to water the plants. Across the street, neighbors pretended not to watch me. I didn't mind. Let them wonder how much I'd known, how long I'd been planning. I picked up the hose, and in the quiet I said it again, the same words I'd given him as they cuffed him in my kitchen. You took away my place of peace. I took away yours forever. The desert air carried the words into the dark. And I knew, wherever Derek was sitting in that cold, narrow cell, they'd be echoing there too.